I had always felt a quiet reverence for my grandpa, a man whose presence seemed to fill any room with a gentle calmness. From my earliest memories, he was a steady figure, wrapped in a soft cardigan that smelled faintly of cedarwood and old books. There was something about him that made the world feel safer, as if his very being carried the weight of years lived with kindness and wisdom. His eyes, a clear shade of blue, held stories I had yet to hear, and his smile, though often reserved, warmed the coldest of days. Growing up, I spent countless afternoons at his house, nestled in a neighborhood where time moved a little slower. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and the walls held the laughter of generations. But perhaps the most cherished times were mornings spent together, especially breakfast. It was more than just a meal. It was a ritual, a sacred space where the world paused, and we connected without the noise of everyday life. Grandpa's kitchen was small but inviting, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the faint sweetness of syrup. I remembered how, as a child, I would sit at the kitchen table, legs swinging, eyes wide with curiosity. Grandpa would be there, moving with a quiet grace, flipping pancakes or stirring oatmeal. He never rushed, and his calm demeanor seemed to slow down time itself. Those mornings were my sanctuary, moments where I felt seen and safe. His stories would drift through the air like gentle smoke, weaving together the past and present, bridging the gap between generations. There was a softness in his voice that made even the simplest words feel important. He didn't speak often of his struggles or triumphs, but when he did, I listened as if each tale was a treasure. Grandpa had a way of making history alive, painting pictures of days long gone with vivid detail. His wisdom wasn't shouted. It was offered quietly, like a gift for those willing to receive it. Sitting across from him, I felt the weight of his experiences, the lessons etched into the lines on his face. Beyond the stories and the gentle advice, what I cherished most was the feeling of belonging he gave me. In a world that often felt uncertain and fast-paced, Grandpa's home was a refuge. The comfort of his presence was a balm to my restless spirit. I knew without a doubt that no matter where life took me, those mornings at his kitchen table were a constant, a thread of love and stability woven through the fabric of my life. I thought back to one particular morning when I was no more than 8 years old. I had woken up early, the sun just beginning to peek through the curtains, casting a golden hue across the room. My feet barely touched the floor as I padded down the hallway to Grandpa's kitchen. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear the soft clinking of dishes and the low hum of his old radio playing a familiar tune. The room smelled of butter and cinnamon, and the warmth from the oven radiated like a gentle embrace. Grandpa looked up from the stove and smiled when he saw me standing there, still half-dressed in my pajamas. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he said, his voice rough but full of affection. I shuffled over to the table, pulling out the chair beside him. As I settled in, he slid a plate toward me, piled high with golden pancakes, each one slightly imperfect but made with care. The syrup pooled around the edges, glistening like amber in the morning light. That breakfast wasn't just food. It was a ceremony. Grandpa took his time, savoring each bite, and I tried to mirror him, learning the rhythm of patience and appreciation. Between mouthfuls, he told me about the garden he tended in the backyard, describing the flowers blooming even in early spring. I listened intently, imagining the colors and scents through his words. There was a quiet joy in those moments, an unspoken connection that made me feel deeply loved. As I grew older, those mornings remained a cornerstone of my relationship with Grandpa. They became a sanctuary where I could lay down the burdens of youth, school worries, friendships, and the awkwardness of growing up. In his presence I found a gentle strength that steadied me, a reminder that no matter how complicated life became, there was always a place to return to, where love was simple and steadfast. Grandpa never pushed me to be anyone other than myself. Instead, he offered encouragement through his actions, listening without judgment, sharing his quiet laughter, and showing up every day with the same unwavering kindness. His wisdom wasn't delivered in grand speeches but in small gestures, the way he folded the napkin just so, the careful way he poured the coffee, the patient way he answered my endless questions. I often marveled at how someone so unassuming could hold such a vast reservoir of knowledge and grace. It was as if the years had distilled into a gentle power, one that didn't demand attention but naturally drew people in. Even now, as an adult, I found myself seeking out those qualities in others, hoping to carry forward the legacy Grandpa had embodied. The kitchen itself was a reflection of him, a place where warmth lingered long after the stove was turned off, and where memories were etched into every corner. The faded wallpaper, the chipped wooden table, the collection of mismatched chairs. They all told a story of a life well lived and loved. Sitting there, I felt connected not only to Grandpa but to the generations before him, to the family who had gathered around that table and shared in the same simple joy. I realized that breakfast with Grandpa was more than just a meal. It was a conduit for connection. It was in those quiet, unhurried moments that the foundation of my identity was laid. The values he lived by, kindness, patience, resilience, were not taught through lectures but through the rhythm of our mornings together. Each pancake flipped, each cup of coffee poured was a lesson in love and presence. Even now, when life's pace quickens and days blur into one another, I find myself reaching for those memories. The image of Grandpa quietly humming as he moves around the kitchen remains a beacon of calm. His gentle spirit, the wisdom resting in his smile, and the comfort of those breakfasts continue to shape who I am. They remind me that sometimes, the most profound moments are found in the simplest acts of sharing a meal with someone you love. That Sunday morning, the soft glow of sunlight filtered gently through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the kitchen floor. The air was crisp with the promise of early spring, and everything outside seemed hushed, as if waiting for the day to fully awaken. I found myself walking up the familiar path to Grandpa's house, feeling a quiet excitement blooming in my chest. The scent of dew on freshly mown grass mingled with the faint aroma of wood smoke from a nearby chimney, welcoming me home before I even stepped inside. The door creaked open with a familiar creak, and the warmth from within spilled out, inviting me in from the cool morning air. Grandpa's kitchen was already alive with the comforting sounds of breakfast being prepared. The soft clatter of pans, the gentle bubbling of something cooking on the stove, and the low hum of his old radio playing a tune that seemed to dance through the room. The golden light caught the edges of the worn wooden table, illuminating the tiny flecks of flour dust that floated lazily in the air. I paused on the threshold, taking it all in. The cozy clutter of cookbooks stacked unevenly in the corner, the faded sunflower print on the wallpaper, and the small vase of wildflowers he'd picked from the garden the day before. Grandpa stood by the stove, his back slightly stooped but steady, expertly flipping pancakes with a practiced hand. His gray hair caught the sunlight, giving him an almost halo-like glow that made him seem even more like the gentle guardian I'd always known. When he turned and saw me, his face broke into a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his bright eyes. "Well, good morning, sleepyhead," he said, his voice carrying the same comforting tone as always. "Just in time, breakfast's almost ready." There was no rush in his words, just a peaceful invitation that made me feel instantly at ease. I moved to the kitchen table and pulled out the chair beside him, the familiar creak echoing the many mornings we'd shared in this very spot. Grandpa reached over to pour a fresh cup of coffee for himself, the rich aroma swirling between us. The sound of the coffee pot dripping was like a gentle rhythm, grounding the moment in a simple unspoken harmony. I could smell the sweet hint of syrup already pooling in the pan, and my stomach gave a small, eager rumble. He gestured toward the plate he was setting down, piled high with golden pancakes, their edges slightly crisp and inviting. "Sit yourself down," he said softly, taking a seat opposite me. "Got a fresh batch just for you." The warmth in his eyes made me feel seen, like this moment was just as important to him as it was to me. As I settled in, I couldn't help but notice the small details that made his kitchen feel like a sanctuary. The worn wooden table, scarred from years of family meals, held a simple vase with a single daffodil, its bright yellow petals catching the sunlight. The radio hummed quietly, playing an old jazz tune that drifted through the room like a gentle breeze. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the passage of this sacred morning ritual. I reached for the syrup, drizzling it slowly over the pancakes, watching as it pooled and glistened. Grandpa picked up his fork and took a bite, closing his eyes briefly as if savoring the familiar flavors. "You know," he began, "there's something about breakfast that sets the tone for the whole day. It's not just about the food. It's about the time we take to be together, to slow down and share a moment." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within me. In this quiet kitchen, away from the rush of the world, there was a sense of peace that seemed to settle over everything. It was a pause, a breath, an opportunity to connect. The simple act of sitting here with Grandpa, sharing these pancakes and coffee, was a balm for the soul. He leaned back in his chair, eyes twinkling as he looked around the room filled with the morning light. "I remember when I was your age," he said. "My own grandpa used to make these same pancakes. We didn't have much, but those mornings felt like the richest times." His voice softened, carrying the weight of fond memories. It's funny how the smallest things, like a warm kitchen and a plate of food, can hold so much meaning. I asked him to tell me more, and he obliged, weaving stories of his childhood, the farm where he grew up, and the lessons learned over the years. As he spoke, the kitchen seemed to grow warmer, filled with the echoes of the past and the promise of the present. His words painted vivid pictures in my mind, and I could almost taste the syrup and butter of those long-ago breakfasts. The sunlight shifted, casting golden hues across the table, and I felt a swell of affection for this man who had given me so much more than just pancakes. Grandpa's invitation to join him this morning was more than a casual gesture. It was a reminder of the enduring bond between us, a connection that transcended time and distance. Between bites, we fell into a comfortable rhythm, the kind that only years of shared mornings could create. There were moments of silence, punctuated by the soft clink of cutlery, and the occasional sip of coffee. In those pauses I felt the quiet strength of Grandpa's presence, a steady anchor in the ebb and flow of life. The kitchen window framed a view of the garden outside, where early blooms were just beginning to peek through the soil. Grandpa glanced over, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Spring always feels like a fresh start," he said. "It's a chance to grow, to nurture, and to look forward." His words hung in the air, filled with hope and gentle encouragement. I smiled, grateful for this moment of shared reflection. It was in these simple exchanges that the depth of our relationship revealed itself, not through grand gestures, but through the warmth of presence and the quiet sharing of space. The smell of pancakes and coffee, the soft light in Grandpa's steady voice combined to create a tapestry of comfort and belonging. As the morning wore on, I realized that this invitation to breakfast was more than just an offer of food. It was an opening to something deeper. Grandpa's home, with its worn floors and familiar sounds, was a place where time slowed and love was made manifest in the smallest of acts. Sitting there with him, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the continuity and connection that these mornings provided. With every bite and every shared glance, the day ahead seemed less daunting, and the world outside a little less overwhelming. In Grandpa's kitchen, wrapped in the soft light of an early Sunday, I found a quiet sanctuary, a place where the simple ritual of breakfast became a powerful expression of love and belonging. As the morning sunlight shifted gently across the kitchen table, Grandpa began to share stories that seemed to stretch beyond the walls of the room, weaving together threads of the past with lessons that felt timeless. The pancakes had long since disappeared, replaced by steaming cups of coffee that filled the space between our words with a comforting warmth. His eyes, bright and steady, held a spark as he leaned forward, the weight of his years softened by the kindness in his voice. "You know," he started, "life has a funny way of teaching us what really matters, often through the toughest times." He paused, taking a slow sip of his coffee before continuing. "When I was younger, I faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, but it was the love of family and the strength to keep going that carried me through." His gaze met mine, steady and sincere, inviting me into the world he was painting with his words. I listened intently, feeling the gravity of his experiences settle around us like a gentle embrace. Grandpa spoke of perseverance, not as something grand or heroic, but as a quiet, persistent push forward in the face of hardship. His stories weren't just recollections of events. They were lessons wrapped in memory, each one a thread in the fabric of our family's legacy. I asked questions here and there, eager to understand more, and he answered patiently, never rushing, always making sure I felt included in the conversation. One story lingered in my mind, a tale of a winter long ago when the power went out for days, and the family gathered around a fireplace, telling stories to keep the cold at bay. Grandpa's voice softened as he recounted the laughter that filled the room despite the darkness outside. "It's those moments," he said, "where love becomes more than just words. It becomes a light that guides you through the storm." The image stayed with me, vivid and warm, a reminder of resilience built on connection. Between sips of coffee, I shared some of my own thoughts and dreams, feeling the ease that comes from being truly heard. Grandpa nodded thoughtfully, offering gentle encouragement without judgment. His wisdom wasn't about telling me what to do, but about helping me see the value in my own journey. It was a delicate balance, sharing advice while honoring my path, and it made me feel both supported and free. The kitchen seemed to hold our conversation in a quiet bubble, the outside world fading away as we delved deeper into stories and reflections. Grandpa spoke of love. Not just the romantic kind, but the steady, enduring love of family and friends that shapes who we are. It's the foundation, he said softly, the anchor that keeps us grounded no matter what. I nodded, feeling the truth of those words settle in my heart. As the morning light grew warmer, our talk turned to the legacy of those who came before us, the values and traditions that had been passed down through generations. Grandpa reached into a drawer and pulled out a small worn photograph, its edges frayed from years of handling. It was an image of his own grandparents, standing proudly in front of their old farmhouse. He traced a finger along the faded faces, telling me about their hard work, their kindness, and the lessons they left behind. Holding the photograph, I felt a profound connection to a past I had only glimpsed through stories. Grandpa's voice filled with pride and tenderness as he described how those ancestors had shaped the family's values: honesty, perseverance, and a deep respect for one another. It wasn't just history. It was a living thread that linked us all, a reminder that I was part of something larger than myself. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of that legacy resting comfortably between us. The quiet was not empty but full of meaning and shared understanding. The sunlight caught the dust motes floating in the air, and I felt as if time itself had slowed, allowing me to fully absorb the significance of these stories. Grandpa then shared a tradition that had always been important to him: an annual gathering where family members would come together to celebrate their roots, share stories, and renew their bonds. It's more than just a reunion, he explained. It's a way to remember who we are and where we come from. His eyes shone with the warmth of countless memories, and I sensed how deeply these rituals had nurtured his spirit. I realized that these breakfasts were a smaller, more intimate extension of that tradition, a space where stories were told, wisdom was shared, and love was quietly reinforced. The rhythm of our conversation, the ebb and flow of questions and answers, laughter and reflection, felt like a sacred dance passed down through the years. As the hours slipped by, I found myself opening up more, sharing fears and hopes I hadn't voiced before. Grandpa listened without interruption, his presence steady and reassuring. There was no judgment, only acceptance, and that made it easier to be vulnerable. In that kitchen, surrounded by the warmth of freshly brewed coffee and the echoes of family history, I felt a deep sense of belonging. The stories wove together lessons of love, perseverance, and the importance of holding on to one's values, even when life gets difficult. Grandpa's voice, steady and calm, was like a thread pulling me closer to my roots, reminding me that I was never alone in my struggles or my dreams. Each tale was a gift, a piece of a larger mosaic that shaped my understanding of who I was and who I wanted to be. We laughed together at memories of clumsy mistakes and youthful misadventures, the kind that only time can soften into fond anecdotes. Grandpa's eyes sparkled with mischief as he recounted moments of stubbornness and unexpected joy, and I found myself smiling, grateful for the lightness he brought to even the toughest stories. Between stories, I asked more about the lessons he had learned, eager to capture the wisdom that wasn't always spoken but felt deeply. He told me about patience, about the value of kindness even when it's hard, and about the strength found in forgiveness. Each lesson felt like a seed planted in fertile soil, ready to grow in its own time. As the morning stretched on, our conversation deepened into a quiet understanding, a shared recognition of the importance of family, of history, and of the love that binds us across time. The kitchen, with its worn wooden table and soft morning light, became a sacred space where wisdom was passed gently from one generation to the next. I realized then that these mornings were more than simple breakfasts. They were lessons in love and life, moments that shaped me quietly but profoundly. Grandpa's stories, his patience, and his unwavering presence were the foundation upon which I was building my own path. In that kitchen, surrounded by the familiar sounds and smells, I felt a profound gratitude for the stories shared, for the wisdom given, and for the quiet strength that Grandpa embodied. Those moments filled with laughter, reflection, and heartfelt conversation would stay with me, guiding me, grounding me, and reminding me always of the enduring power of family and love. The morning sunlight softened as it filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the worn wooden table. After our long conversation, Grandpa reached into a nearby cabinet with a gentle smile, pulling out an old wooden box that looked as though it had been there for decades. The edges were smoothed by time, and the latch creaked softly as he opened it, revealing a collection of photographs, letters, and small keepsakes carefully arranged inside. He lifted a delicate silver locket, its surface engraved with intricate patterns worn faint by years of handling. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said quietly, his voice tinged with reverence. "She wore it every day and passed it down to me. Now I keep it here so it stays close to the family." I reached out to touch it, feeling the cool metal in my palm, connecting me to a history I had only glimpsed through stories. Grandpa carefully unfolded a faded letter, the handwriting looping elegantly across the yellowed paper. "This was from my father," he explained, "written during the war. It reminds me of the sacrifices our family made, and the love that kept them strong through difficult times." As I traced the lines of ink with my eyes, I felt the weight of those words, the quiet courage and hope that had endured across generations. He passed the letter to me, and as I held it, I realized how these heirlooms were more than mere objects. They were tangible links to our past, vessels of memory and meaning. Grandpa's careful stewardship of these treasures showed me how deeply he valued the stories and traditions that shaped our family. It was as if every item carried a piece of their spirit, preserved through time by love and remembrance. The table between us became a sacred space, where history and present intertwined seamlessly. Grandpa shared the stories behind each keepsake, the worn pocket watch that had belonged to his grandfather, the embroidered handkerchief made by his mother, and the faded photograph of a family gathering long ago. Each artifact held a story, a lesson, or a moment frozen in time, and as he spoke, I felt the threads of our heritage weaving through the room. He paused to look at me, a quiet seriousness in his eyes. "These things," he said softly, "are reminders of who we are and where we come from. They carry the values and hopes of those who came before us. It's important to hold on to them, not just the objects but what they represent." His words settled deeply in my heart, awakening a sense of responsibility I hadn't fully understood before. The rhythm of our conversation slowed, the weight of the moment inviting reflection. I felt a profound connection, not just to Grandpa, but to the generations whose lives and love had built the foundation of our family. The quiet kitchen, filled with the scent of coffee and the soft light of morning, seemed to hold the echoes of those who had come before. Their presence felt though unseen. Grandpa then reached beneath the table, pulling out a small quilt folded neatly in his lap. The fabric was worn but vibrant, a patchwork of colors and patterns stitched together with care. "This quilt was made by my mother," he said, spreading it gently across the table. "She poured her heart into every stitch, sewing stories and love into its threads." I ran my fingers over the fabric, imagining the hands that had created it, the warmth it must have held. The quilt felt like a tangible expression of legacy, a symbol of continuity and care passed down through generations. Grandpa's eyes shone with pride as he spoke of the traditions tied to it, the family gatherings where it was spread out, the stories told while wrapped in its embrace, and the comfort it provided during difficult times. It was more than a blanket. It was a living testament to the strength of family bonds. As we sat together, the quilt between us, I felt the gentle rhythm of our shared history envelop us. Grandpa's stories and the artifacts he treasured created a bridge between past and present, grounding me in a sense of identity and belonging. The legacy he carried was not just in objects or memories, but in the love and values he passed to me, quietly but profoundly. In that moment, I understood that this breakfast was more than a simple meal or a casual visit. It was a sacred ritual of connection, a time to honor the lineage that shaped us and to carry forward the wisdom and love embedded in our family's story. The rhythm of our conversation, the peaceful surroundings, and the weight of the heirlooms all combined to create an unforgettable experience, one that I knew would stay with me long after the morning light faded. Grandpa's gentle hands carefully folded the quilt and returned it to its place, his eyes meeting mine with a warmth that spoke of trust and hope. "It's up to you now," he said softly, To carry these stories, these values into your own life. To be the keeper of this legacy. His words wrapped around me like the quilt itself, a tender reminder of the responsibility and privilege of family. I nodded, feeling the depth of that charge settle within me. The quiet power of our conversation, the tangible heirlooms, and the peaceful morning combined to create a moment of profound clarity. This was not just about remembering the past, but about living it, honoring those who came before by embodying the love, resilience, and kindness they had passed down. The kitchen seemed to breathe with the history we shared, the familiar sounds and scents forming a backdrop to this intimate exchange. I felt grateful for Grandpa's willingness to open this window into our family's soul, to invite me into a space where legacy was not an abstract concept, but a living, breathing force. As the morning wore on, I realized that these breakfasts were more than a tradition. They were a sacred space for growth, reflection, and connection. The rhythm of our time together, the stories told, and the heirlooms shared were threads in a tapestry that bound us across time. And in that quiet kitchen, surrounded by the warmth of family and memory, I found a deep sense of purpose, to honor this legacy and carry it forward with love. As the morning light softened and the last crumbs of breakfast were cleared from the table, Grandpa reached for his cup once more, lifting it with a steady hand. He looked across at me, his eyes reflecting a quiet warmth that seemed to hold the weight of generations. "Before we finish," he said softly, "let's raise a toast to family, to love, and to the future." His voice was gentle but firm, carrying the significance of the moment. I picked up my own cup, feeling a swell of gratitude rise within me. The simple act of raising our drinks together felt like a sacred gesture, a promise to honor the bonds that tethered us across time. Grandpa's smile deepened, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, wrapped in the quiet power of connection. "To family," he repeated, his voice steady. "For all the love that's been passed down, and for the love that will continue to grow." I echoed his words, feeling the truth behind them settle deep in my heart. It was a reminder that these breakfasts, these moments shared, were part of a larger story, one that stretched far beyond the walls of this kitchen. As the cups clinked softly, I reflected on the morning's warmth, the stories told, the wisdom shared, and the heirlooms that carried the echoes of those who came before us. Each piece had woven itself into the fabric of my understanding, strengthening my sense of identity and belonging. The legacy Grandpa entrusted to me was not just about memories, but about living with intention and love. The quiet moments that followed were filled with a comfortable silence, the kind that only years of shared trust can create. I looked around the kitchen, noticing once again the familiar details, the faded wallpaper, the worn wooden table, and the small vase of wildflowers on the windowsill. These surroundings, so ordinary to anyone else, held a sacredness that I hadn't fully appreciated before. Grandpa's gaze softened as he spoke again, this time with a hint of hope. "These mornings together, they mean more than you know. They remind me that the future is bright, so long as we remember where we come from and who we are." His words wrapped around me like a gentle embrace, filling me with a sense of purpose and peace. I felt inspired, a quiet determination blooming within me to carry forward the love and lessons passed down through our family. The responsibility was humbling, but also deeply meaningful. This bond we shared, nurtured over countless breakfasts and stories, was a treasure I vowed to protect and cherish. As I prepared to leave Grandpa's house, the sunlight had shifted, casting long golden beams through the windows. I paused at the door, glancing back at the kitchen that had been a sanctuary for generations. Grandpa stood in the doorway, his smile steady and reassuring. "Come back soon," he said simply, his voice full of warmth. I nodded, feeling the promise of many more mornings like this ahead, filled with laughter, stories, and the quiet strength of family. Walking away, I carried with me not just the memories of today, but a renewed commitment to honor the legacy that Grandpa had so lovingly shared. The world outside seemed a little softer, the day a little brighter, and I knew that no matter where life took me, these breakfasts would remain a beacon of love and connection, an enduring thread woven through the tapestry of my life. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.